Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is our quarterfinal wrap-up episode of Tailgate Trashtalk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We've got some interesting topics to talk about after the quarterfinals. Some crazy games, some interesting officiating that I kind of want to get Bentley's thoughts on. And we were 0 for 4 with bye-week teams, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Maybe shit on the committee a little more because we love to do that around here. But first off, Bentley, how you doing, man? Happy holidays.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm scatterbrained because holidays are a wild time, and falling in the middle of the week just doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm doing all right, brother. I'm doing all right. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. We need to figure out a way to make the new year happen on like every year on either a Saturday or a Sunday. Christmas, same thing, Saturday or a Sunday, something like that. Or even a Thursday. If it was Thursday every year, maybe, because you get the idea of Black Friday works out with Thanksgiving. Like, we can do better, right? We can do better.
I agree.
All that aside, we had an interesting result in the quarterfinals. You went 3 for 4. Your only miss was Boise State. Your routine hatred of James Franklin is mostly warranted, except they've had the easiest draw here in the college football playoff. Notre Dame gets the win over Georgia, Ohio State over Oregon, and Texas over Arizona State. I knew that my bracket was going to hinge on that Oregon matchup against whoever won, Tennessee or Ohio State. I did not expect Ohio State to be on the war path that they appear to be on now. You've been on Ohio State all year, so I'm going to start there. I know the Penn State game was the first of the games this week, but I want to start there because we had a rematch. We talked a lot about that October 12th matchup between Ohio State and Oregon up in Eugene. We discussed quite a bit that despite losing, Ohio State kind of, represented themselves well in a hostile environment in the Pacific Northwest at night game in Eugene, pretty hostile, pretty rambunctious crowd up there. And to lose the way they lost, heartbreaking fashion, but honestly, it wasn't like they just got the doors blown off them up there in Eugene. Instead, we get a Ohio State team that appears to be firmly on a mission after the Michigan loss. Will Howard looks like he's figured out how to play quarterback, which is one thing that when we talked about the beginning of the season, my biggest worry about this Ohio State team was Will Howard, right? Mm-hmm. There's so much talent around him, playmakers galore. We talk about J.J. Smith a lot, but you look at that wide receiver core, Mecca Ibuka is going to be a high first-round pick. J.J. Smith should already be like a top 5 pick in the NFL, but he's got to play 2 more years. The 2 running backs in the backfield, they're loaded at tight end as well, guys that can complement both the running game and the pass game, not to mention the defense. I thought Will Howard was going to be potentially the biggest question mark. I think you agreed to a certain extent, other than the fact that he is an experienced guy. We've seen that play out here in the playoff. He did not look good against Michigan, but he has looked very, very good against both Tennessee and now against Oregon. And Ohio State wins going away from Oregon. Maybe the biggest surprise of the weekend. I would consider it the biggest surprise of the weekend. Ohio State just smashes Oregon. It was never really close. Oregon kind of made it like, are we going to see something here at halftime? And then Ohio State turned it back on. Another thing I want to get your thoughts on. So Will Howard's play, Ohio State's on a mission, but the last thing I want to talk about is Chip Kelly has figured out his rhythm calling a game with this offense. We know Chip Kelly's one of the greatest offensive minds to ever be around the game. His play calling ability at Oregon was always something that was kind of masterclass all the time. Now we're seeing that play out with Ohio State. They were able to run the ball, throw the ball. He hit Oregon in almost every weak spot they had, it seemed like, on almost every play in the first half. And then when they didn't necessarily have that, it was just, I think he was in Will Howard's ear and was like, listen, I'm going to call this play, but if you don't just throw it to number 4, you're doing it wrong. So,
yeah.
Just a few thoughts I had. I'm curious your thoughts, and of course, anything else you've got to take away from this Ohio State-Oregon drubbing.
Yeah, it's certain. I understand why people think it was the most surprising thing for the weekend. I think personally, what was a little more surprising was the Texas collapse against Arizona State. That was a little more shocking to me.
Sure. Sure.
Especially given that Arizona State's leading receiver was out for this game. Like you said, I've been in Ohio State all year. I figured Ohio State was going to win this game. I didn't think they would win it by 20. Um, that was a little shocking. The span of time that elapsed between the Big Ten championship game and this game, I think, was a detriment to Oregon as a team, and it's been this way for as long as I can remember. Right, that's a fast-paced offense that. It's like you tend to lose some of that rhythm. And that offense was really clicking as the year went along, and we saw them put up was 48 in the Big Ten championship game or whatever it was, high 40s, and they come out and they can't do anything on offense, right? And that's not even to talk to the skill and the talent level that is on the Ohio State defense. We know about that Ohio State defense. You've said it all year long. They have 5-6 guys up front that are going to play in the NFL. They have Denzel Burke. Not Ward. Ward plays in the NFL. Igbinosa is on that back end. Caleb Downs, obviously. Aaron. Yeah, they have 7 NFL guys that start for them on the defensive side of the ball, right? So we know about that. But to me, the Oregon team came out and just was like, oh, we've beaten this team already. We're going to try to do the same things we did in the first matchup this week, and it's going to go about the same. Well, that just wasn't the case because Ohio State is playing at an extremely high level, whereas when they came in the first time, it was early in the year. They were still trying to figure it out, really. That's no longer the case, right? Everything is working for Ohio State, and Oregon, to me, didn't seem like they made any adjustments, and they hadn't played for so long that, they had no rhythm coming into this game, So I thought it was a huge detriment to them. The bye, obviously, people talk about you want to have the bye. Well, turns out 0-4 for my teams. Maybe that bye is not a good thing, Ohio State is they're just better, man. Chip Kelly, you talked about it. Hey, he's got this offense clicking. Historically, Chip Kelly, a run-first kind of guy.
Yep.
And I know they have Judkins and Henderson, who are extremely, extremely talented backs, but it almost looks to me as if they're playing a pass first to set up the run style offense rather than a run first to set up the pass at this point, because they realize they have 3 NFL wide receivers in Cardell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, and Emeka Egbuka. If you have 3 NFL receivers, you probably should be throwing more than you're running.
They're probably about to be on a 4-year run of top half of the first round wide receivers. We had Arvin Harrison went this year in the top 5 or 8, whatever it was. And then Egbuka probably goes in the top half of the first round this year. Cardell Tate could assert himself and become a top half of the first round guy. And then, of course, whenever J.J. Smith becomes eligible, because he's a fucking monster at 19 years old, he's obviously going to be – I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the top 5, right? A Jamar Chase level in that sort of thing with a pick. And not to mention, the guys they've put in the NFL the last few years, right? Garrett Wilson, and we've got Terry McLaurin and all those guys. They've been putting fucking wide receivers in the NFL. But this group that they've got right now, holy shit. That is.
Yeah. And they have the trigger man to do it, right? I know you were worried about Will Howard. I was less worried about Will Howard than probably you were, but I agreed with the sentiment. I understood the worry and why you felt that way. I always kind of lean towards an experienced guy is going to figure it out. Herbie was talking about this a lot on the broadcast through the lens of, can Dylan Gabriel play in the NFL? He's like, well, he has 63 starts. That's a lot of NFL teams really like that. Same with Will Howard in this aspect, right? He played a ton at K-State, and then it was now he's going to come over and learn a brand new system at Ohio State with Chip Kelly. He just has to kind of figure out this system and how it's going to play to his strengths. And he certainly has done that, right? Everything they're doing is working. He made beautiful throws all day long. He hit that deep throw down the seam to Emeka Egbuka for the second touchdown.
What an unbelievable catch, too.
Yeah, it was a tiny bit
on it.
Mm-hmm.
What a play, start to finish.
Yeah, so this was as much of an ass beating as you can get, right? It was 14-0, I think, before the broadcast even switched over. Yeah, we were watching overtime, and Ohio State had already won this game.
Yeah, yeah. The national anthem had just finished and they were up 14-0.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the previous game was still going on. And I looked at the scoreboard. Ohio State had scored 7, and I was like, shit, I better get this on another screen, I guess.
We didn't even see the first touchdown. I had to go back and find it on social media. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah.
It was an awesome game, though. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was cool to kind of see Dylan Gabriel get it going a little bit in the second half, and they kept it just close enough that like you thought maybe a turnover or something, but Ohio State just shut them down. Like at every chance the momentum had to flip, Ohio State had an answer for it, and that's really a sign of a great team. I think there's been a lot of talk this year of like there's no great team, there's no one great team in college football this season. You know, because we all kind of agreed that even though they were undefeated, Oregon wasn't like a great team. I would push back and say that this Ohio State team is great. Like
I think this Ohio State team on January 3rd is a great team.
Sure. I think
there were times throughout this season that we could have pointed to a thing or two. We talked about the O-line, right? Young and they were hurt. The Michigan game, it just seemed like they just weren't engaged, right? The Oregon game, the defense wasn't great. They didn't get pressure on Dylan Gabriel. That's another point I want to make about this one. 8 sacks. Dylan Gabriel, I believe, had been sacked 6 times coming into this game, and they sacked him 8 times. So it's kind of a 180, right? Especially from the Michigan game, right? This Ohio State team is 180 degrees from the Michigan game. And it probably is just yet another example of what you keep saying, in that Ryan Day doesn't have a college football problem. He has a Michigan problem. And I think we're starting to see, or we're seeing that in the playoff, just pummeling 2 really good teams, right? Tennessee is probably not a team I would call a great team, but very good up front on defense. And they weren't even able to really sniff creating problems for Howard and company. And then this Oregon team getting to Gabriel 8 times, and you mentioned it, right? We've talked about the NFL talent on the front for Ohio State. They really showed out in this game, and they were getting a lot of pressure without having to blitz, which is not what I would have expected against this Oregon offensive line. But credit to those Ohio State folks. Credit to the NIL collective for making sure that they could keep all of this talent in-house. I read somewhere that J.J. Smith is a $5 million NIL guy going forward. So they're going to have to continue to go raise funds from the boosters. But yeah, that pressure they were able to get on Dylan Gabriel. I think you mentioned having an answer every time Oregon threatened. It seemed like there was a sack or a pressure that made him throw a ball away that would kind of change the momentum of the Oregon offense whenever they kind of got things to where you felt like maybe they got it rolling a little bit, and they weren't really able to. Good to see you, Dad. Thanks for tuning in. So let's move on. Let's go backtrack just a little bit. I wanted to talk about that game up front because I feel like it's maybe the biggest one on everybody's mind. But we'll go back to New Year's Eve, and we had Penn State playing Boise State, and James Franklin. I don't know how fair it is to say he exercises some demons against a top 5 opponent, top 10 opponent, because technically Boise State is not a top 5 ranked team. They were the 3rd seed in the playoff. They are a top 10 team, but it is not a secret that this is the draw that every team probably wanted, right? These top teams probably wanted this, SMU and then Boise State. And I talked about it a little bit with you. It felt like that this might be the game where everybody can just point at and say, we've got to get rid of the automatic buys for conference champions. Because these 2 teams felt like they were from different planets. Penn State, I've talked about it all year, that this is the most talented team James Franklin's ever had at Penn State on this roster. Now, whether James Franklin can finish the deed or not is another story. But I asked the question in a group, and I don't believe I asked it of you. I asked it in another group because they were talking about Ashton Genty, and they were mad at him because he had the fumbles, and like, he doesn't fumble. But if you look at the Boise State roster and you look at the Penn State roster, there's probably one guy on Boise State who gets any run, and it's Ashton Genty. Now, I'll ask you the question. I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit because I asked this question in the group, and I couldn't answer it necessarily myself. If you had this roster for Penn State and you just took Ashton Jeanty and like picked him up in a crane device and dropped him into that roster, what percentage of carries do you think he's getting on that Penn State team? Because he's not getting the 95% of carries that he gets with Boise State, in my opinion. I'm curious your thoughts on like, because they've got two running backs that would dominate the Mountain West. Not the way, at least two running backs, not the way that Ashton Jeanty has. You and I agree, he's a mutant, he's special. But if you put him on this Penn State roster, one, he behind a better offensive line, he might run for 7,000 yards. But what percentage of carries do you think he would get in that rotation with Allen and Singleton?
45.
I think that's fair.
Like, because they do have two guys already that split time. So, like, he obviously is the best running back in that room.
Yes.
When he walks in the door, and you want to feature him as much as you can, but you still have to appease the other ones. I don't know, if it were me, if I were the coach, he'd get 70% of the carries. But I understand that in today's day and age, you have to re-recruit your own players.
Yeah.
And if you just don't give your guys the ball, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
So Katron Allen would be like, hey, I'm out, dog.
I'll go to Boise State.
Yeah. I would give him as many carries as I could.
Yeah.
But I think reality, right, like 40, 45%, where he's
Right.
still the feature back, but
yeah,
he's not getting the majority. Like, he would get the majority of the three, but the
Right.
twosome behind him would get more than him individually.
Yeah. That was kind of the point I was trying to make with that question in the other group that I was asking it in, is like this. It's unfortunate that Boise State was the 3 seed, because now they're going to kind of be the like whipping boy for, well, this is why we shouldn't have the automatic bids. Yeah, it's year one. Hopefully the committee can kind of unfuck some of this stuff, but I don't blame Boise State, right? A lot of people are trying to blame Boise State, or at least it sounds like in ways people are trying to blame Boise State for being in the Mountain West and ending up the 3 seed. It's just we're just dealing with like haves and have-nots, and eventually we'll figure it out. I hope. Anyway, maybe I have false hope in the committee going forward, but that's something we'll talk a little more about. I just wanted to bring that up. But
yeah,
this game between Penn State and Boise State. Penn State gets a pretty comfortable win. Unfortunately, Jeanty fumbles, and it was kind of a back-breaking turnover early in the game. Weird play on the sideline where he fumbles and the ball kind of bounces back into play, and the DB makes a really good play to get control of it before going out of bounds. Any perception change for Penn State, though? I think that's the important thing going forward here, is like Penn State gets to claim a top 5, top 10 win, but any perception change for them?
No, because Boise State was in this game until about midway through the fourth quarter. They had a touchdown on the board to cut the lead to 3. They got called back by a face mask penalty, and that was the breaking point of the game.
Yeah,
like they called that offensive face mask, which was the correct call.
Sure.
Right. He the right tackle very clearly had his hands in the face mask of the defensive end. But if that penalty doesn't happen, then Boise State is right back in this game.
And the pucker factor gets real.
Yeah, it's a 3-point game with like 8 minutes to go.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to look at the box score and say, oh, man, because, it was New Year's Eve, you're out doing your partying, whatever. I was at a New Year's party, but I was sitting next to our very good friend, DJPK Midnight, and he and I were locked in on this game from start to finish. Everybody was out doing their thing, and Brandon and I are just
– You guys were doing the right thing.
We were doing the right thing. But anyone who actually sat down and watched this game realized that Boise State was in this. Mm-hmm. Sure, Penn State was controlling the game, but unlike Ohio State, whenever the momentum kind of flipped a little bit, Penn State didn't necessarily have the answer for it. They controlled the game. But Maddox Baxton threw for 300-plus yards, and like I said, had that touchdown to cut it to 3 but midway through the fourth quarter. And if that happens, then we might see the James Franklin Turtle effect, right?
Yep.
I understand that they were able to run the ball. Actually, they had every run was, I believe they were averaging more yards per carry than they were yards per attempt. But for some reason, they decided they wanted to try to throw the ball in the second half instead of just running it over and over again. I don't know why that was like a weird thing. Andy Kotelnicki, phenomenal offensive play caller for the most part, but let's read the room, bud.
Yeah.
Let's do what works. We're in the playoffs. So it was a little bit of Maddox Madsen playing over his skis above his ability, in my opinion. I thought that he had a phenomenal game. I know that there were 3 interceptions, but like they're just trying to force. They're down 2 scores at the end. They're trying to force the ball. I don't blame the last 2 interceptions on him. There's not much you can do, honestly, there at that point. But he kept them in the game. Every time they needed to play, it felt like he was able to scramble for a first down or make a throw, like make something happen there. And then Jetti did enough. They obviously would stack the box with 7, 8 guys every single play, but like he did enough to keep them honest in the offensive game where they couldn't just sell out and run 9 guys every single play. And Maddox Madsen, I thought played about as good as you fucking could against that Penn State defense, which I mean is really, really good. I'll be interested to see what Abdul Carter, like the availability for him going forward. They didn't talk about him not playing. Like they just kind of were like, oh well, there goes Carter, and then we didn't see him again, and nobody talked about it in the broadcast. So I was like, yeah, where's 11? Why is he not on the field? And nobody said anything, right? But I really thought, I know the final score is going to be a 17-point difference. In my opinion, watching the game, this was not a 17-point victory against a top 10 team for Penn State. This was we got lucky because they committed a penalty on a touchdown, and then the ice was completely tilted, and they had to go into like a hurry up, pass the ball type of offense. That's how this game played out in my mind. Credit to the Penn State defense for bending but not breaking with Jetti, right? I think he had 1 run of 20 plus. So good for them, I guess. You know, it didn't instill a whole load of confidence going forward, in my opinion. But I thought that ultimately for 42 minutes, Boise State played well enough to be like in a closely contested game, and then that penalty down there in the red zone really is what killed it for him. And then the 2 missed field goals, like that doesn't help either.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on the play calling was really, I didn't understand it. You got to lead, and I mean, Katron Allen was abusing that Boise State defense, really. Mm-hmm. Just being the power back that he is, and just being behind his pads, and it seemed like he got 4 yards after contact almost every carry he had this game. So, but yeah, Penn State had a clear plan for Ashton Jeanty. They were not going to let him beat them. They were going to challenge Maddox Madsen to beat them. He did a good job. You mentioned the 300 yards. I said it early in this game, like, God, he looks like he looked shell-shocked for the first about minute and a half of the game. And then he kind of settled in, and like about halftime, I was like, wow, okay, Maddox Madsen's making some fucking throws here. The touchdown run, I forget it. It's Cohen, I believe was his name, number 33 for Boise State. The fullback, the touchdown he got. That was about the moment where you realized like Penn State had a clear plan for Ashton Jeanty, because 3, not 1, not 2, 3 defenders followed him on motion on that play and vacated the middle of the field where Cohen went and scored his touchdown. So they had a clear plan. They were not going to let him be the guy to beat them. And when he popped that 20-plus yard run, the big run that he had in the game, was when really Penn State, you could see they kind of let off because they knew Madsen was going to be throwing a lot, and Jeanty kind of broke it. So, yeah, I agree with you. While the margin felt comfortable, other than when that touchdown, if it had stood, that was about the moment where they could have been threatened. I didn't feel like they were super threatened throughout this game. I agree Boise State was in this game, and without that face mask, we might be talking a different story here, especially with the momentum that really would have swung with a touchdown cutting it to 3. But, I just don't know that I have a different perception of Penn State. It feels like this is a very, very talented team that could underachieve where they're at right now. Like, I could see next round them making really bad coaching decisions against fucking Notre Dame and losing the game because of some of them. It's such a talented team up and down the roster. They don't have real explosive playmakers on the outside on offense, but they've got a lot of guys that can make plays. They've got like we've talked about, the two-headed running back, and that defense is just loaded. All three levels, that defense is loaded. Whether Abdul Carter plays or not could be a big difference maker going forward, but it feels like this could be a coaching fumble going forward, because that throwing the ball when you've got a 2-score lead and your running backs are just crushing the defense is such a weird decision for sure.
Let me ask you this. So Drew Aller has already stated that he's coming back to play next year at Penn State. Is he making a mistake by doing that, given the state of the quarterbacks being drafted this year and that throw he made to the back of the end zone, that deep post route?
I think that's a good point, honestly. This is a very soft quarterback draft class. He could sneak into the first round in this class, honestly. While I don't know that I would call him like what I would expect to be a great NFL quarterback, I think he's a prototypical NFL quarterback. He's got the size. He's got good athleticism, not great, but good. And you got to have athleticism in the NFL nowadays. The days of the statue are pretty well gone. Mm-hmm. And he's got a strong arm. He can make all the throws, maybe not the most accurate quarterback all the time, but he made 2 throws in this game that I thought were really good. And then he dropped one in the bucket against SMU that I could point at and say, like, that's probably film that an NFL coach could look at and say, I might be able to work with this. So I do agree with you, because next year's quarterback class is much stronger as well. Yeah. Like, that's another factor, is like next year's. It's almost like being Alex Sarr this year versus being Alex Sarr next year or the year before, right? The Wemby or the flag drafts. Like, maybe Aller could be the Alex Sarr of the 2025 NFL draft. I think you make a good point.
Yeah, because he was super highly recruited coming out of high school. And then last year, I mean, we talked about it a bunch last year on the show, like he's not performing, all this stuff. And then this year, they're really good all year long. And he's kind of elevated his play.
They've opened it up a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Going into that fucking Penn State game, or excuse me, the Oregon game in the Big Ten Championship. Yeah. And now he's played 2 really good games in the playoff back to back. Granted, the level of competition, maybe not that high, but regardless, you play who's in front of you, you know? Yep. I just, like, we talk about it in basketball, I think, more so than football.
Yeah.
But pedigree, right? This was a pedigree guy coming out of high school, and it's not his fault that he's played for James Franklin. But that guy that got that 5-star recruit is still in there.
Yep.
You know, maybe what's going to happen is he's going to get his draft grade back, and he might be like, oh, I'm going to go because I'm going up against Jackson Dart to be a first-round pick. Like,
right, we're talking, we've got 2 at the top, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, it's very much a crapshoot. Yours has said he probably won't go in the draft. So there's another guy that's off the board. Maybe yours should come out too. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about 2 at the top, and then it's kind of a crapshoot after. And we know how desperate NFL teams are for quarterbacks too.
Yeah.
There's a team that would probably take a chance on a Drew Aller this year versus next year, when the draft class could be 4 to 6 deep, and you're not gonna sneak into the first round the way that you certainly could potentially this year.
Yeah, I just think he's put together a string of really good games here in a row that if I were him, I would have my agent be talking to NFL scouts like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned it, a couple of throws the last few weeks, and it's like,
Can I work with that?
Yeah, I'm 6'4", 220.
That's what I said. Right.
Like, I got wheels.
He's got the prototypical size. He's fairly athletic. I don't dare say sneaky athletic.
I think of all the quarterbacks left in the playoff right now, I think he probably has the most tools.
He fits the mold the most. I agree.
Right? I'm trying
Yep.
Ewers.
If Will Howard had a little bit stronger of an arm, I think he could be in that conversation. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he's got the best tools left.
Yeah.
Until Arch takes over for you, because they're getting blown out next week.
I mean, I think even right now, like
that's probably fair.
You probably look at Aller, before you look at Arch.
Yeah.
If you're just talking about at this exact moment,
he's got the film. right? There's film you can lean on if you're Drew Aller and you're talking to an NFL GM, NFL coach. You can lean on some highlights for sure. Agreed. All right, let's move on. We're gonna talk about the early game on Wednesday. No, I'm sorry, the
third Wednesday,
late game on Wednesday, the second, because we had a shift in schedule, and we're gonna talk about that in a moment. But what ended up being the late game on Wednesday, Texas versus Arizona State. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, the
so
dates, dude. Fuck.
Yeah. Anyway, Texas, Arizona State. You mentioned it a moment ago. You alluded to it that maybe the biggest surprise of the weekend, right? From a total game perspective, I thought it was Ohio State, Oregon, but I do agree with you. This felt like a game that was going to be like 50-0. The way this game started, Texas went right down the field with a touchdown, big play. Then Arizona State has to kick, and they run a punt back to the house, and then they get another stop, and then they run a weird. I guess I shouldn't say weird because it is part of their offense, but they run like an RPO read, and Ewers hits the running back in the hip with the ball, loses it, and that felt like the moment that like everything, the ice just tilted the other direction. Texas didn't seem to ever recover from that. Arizona State afforded themselves very, very well in this game. Played very, very well. I thought Cam Scatabo was at risk of like not coming back to the game at halftime. He's on the sideline throwing up. He'd taken a lot of punishment. But credit to Arizona State, man, and Coach of the Year, Prime called him Cody. They played very, very well, and honestly, might have gotten screwed in this game. I'm curious your thoughts on the targeting that got reviewed but didn't called. I'm going to put my thought out there first on the targeting thing because it felt like that was a pivotal moment in the game. Because Arizona State, if they get that first down, they're at the 37, and they honestly could have driven a little bit, gotten a decent field goal look to potentially win this game in regulation. I thought they got it right, but it sounds like there's a lot of people out there that don't think they got it right. Now, the NFL rule for defenseless player is different than the college rule for defenseless player. College, there's no stipulation for it has to be a launch. There's no stipulation for it has to be crown of the helmet. There's no stipulation for evaluating intent like there is in the NFL. But there is in the rule that it has to be forcible contact to the head and neck area. Now, typically, I view forcible contact as somebody who comes in, leads with either their head or their shoulder, and isn't trying to make like a proper form tackle, which for all intents and purposes is what both the NFL and college are trying to introduce to the game with these rules. They want you to wrap up. They want you to head forward, face mask up, that sort of thing. I thought the Texas defender was face up. I thought his face mask was in front. I thought he went for the wrap up. I don't think he went for the kill shot. However, I do understand that if there are people out there that interpret that as potentially forcible contact to the head and neck area, because he did hit him, their helmets did collide. I just didn't think he was going for what I would typically call targeting. I also don't love the way college football officiates targeting, so I could be a little biased. I'm fully aware that I may have a little bit of an implicit bias when it comes to targeting. What are your thoughts on that, and how much of an impact do you think it had on the finish of this game?
Man, so
they also didn't call it on the field, right? Replay came in and was trying to review whether they should.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one, right? It ultimately it's a judgment call for the most part. I've just seen too many cases of I don't understand why they made the call or why they didn't make the call to really argue one way or the other. I kind of agree with you. I didn't think he was coming in for what you described as a kill shot. It seemed to me he came in a little more heads up than what a targeting call looks like in my mind. You're taught from a young age, see what you hit. And to me, it looked like his head was up enough that he wasn't trying to spear the defender, right? The defenseless receiver thing, again, that's so much of a timing thing, and the objectiveness or subjectiveness of the referee's opinion on when that hit occurred is it's impossible to overturn these things on replay. Impossible. It's very, very difficult to overturn these things on replay. And if you don't make that call on the field, then again, the indisputable evidence has to be there for you to prove to me that this guy lowered his head, made forcible contact with the head or neck area, which, like, he did, right? This is the head and neck area. But he was heads up, and he didn't come in with ill intent, I don't think. It was see defender, see ball, separate ball from defender in the most legal way possible. So I probably would have been on the side of the refs and don't call this targeting. I guess I would have understood it if they had called it targeting. But to not call it on the field and then like go to review and then call it, that would have felt very bad.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't, that would have left a bad taste in my mouth. In terms of the outcome, I don't know that it would have had 15 yards in the first down. Maybe the guy gets ejected, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I think they got it right. I didn't see it as targeting. But again, you probably could tell me that it was targeting and like take a different angle and find another targeting call somewhere else and use that as like a case point or whatever. I just didn't think it was targeting. I didn't think there was malicious intent. I thought his head was up. He was looking at what he was trying to tackle. It just so happened the timing of it made it look like he's a defensive receiver, right? And so I thought it was fine. I was okay with the call. I didn't think it affected the outcome of the game all that much, honestly. But you could have talked me into it the other way too as well.
Yeah, for sure. But we end up with overtime. And an exciting finish to a game that started out like it felt like it was really going to be a blowout. Texas finds a way in overtime against Arizona State, who it felt like kind of had all the momentum, especially in the second half of this game. If they lost this game, I feel like there would have been some real steam behind, like, is it time for Sark to go?
No.
I think there could have been, because that would have been a very, very bad, very embarrassing loss.
No.
I don't, maybe just me, but I didn't understand most of what Texas was doing after the fumble. It felt like Texas was like coaching scared, playing scared. They never recovered. If they didn't have that much more talent than Arizona State, I feel like they could have lost this game by a couple of scores in regulation. It was just a very, very strange game. And I don't know. I guess maybe I'm being hard on Sark, but I just feel like there has to come a time when you're like, all right, we've got to rally at halftime or something. Like, do your fucking job as the head coach. Get your team back engaged in the game. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being hard on Sark.
I think if they had lost this game, there may have been a movement to prevent Sark from ever speaking to his kicker again. That could have been a movement you see coming out of Austin. Pulling him aside and getting in his face and telling him, "Hey, it's okay, bud," before he goes out and misses the kick. That was a weird move to me. I mean, I get coaching up your guy, but he just missed one. I think if you pull him aside and talk to him about this one,
you're just getting
it makes it. Yeah, exactly. It like makes it a bigger deal. You probably just want to give him a slap on the ass and say, "Go make this kick."
Yeah. You're our guy. Go get it.
Yeah, like you've been good all year long. I just make the kick, dude. Yeah. Just simply put the ball between the uprights. That's what I would have done.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm not Bert Auburn.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't think that, to your point of calling for, or you could see a world where if they lose, there is a movement to get Sark out of there. I vehemently disagree with that. You made the playoffs 2 years in a row. You made the SEC title game your first year in the conference. And because you missed 2 kicks and you somehow lose in overtime, then it's time to be gone. Like, that's crazy to me, personally. But I don't know. I'm not a Texas fan, and maybe they would feel differently. It's the same guys that wanted Ryan Day fired. That's who you're talking about right there. The same guys who wanted Ryan Day fired after losing to Michigan are the ones that would call for Sarkisian to lose his job after making college football playoff 2 years in a row.
And then Kirk will call him the lunatic fringe again. Maybe I'm in the lunatic fringe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, big time to come up and be able to win in overtime for Texas in the semifinal. So, all right, let's shift gears to what was supposed to be the night game, the Sugar Bowl, down there in Louisiana. I want to first take a moment of pause. It just an unbelievably nonsensical terroristic attack in the French Quarter, packed on New Year's Eve. A radical drove a truck through a crowd of people with some improvised explosives on board, intending to do a lot more damage than he did. But the death toll last I saw was in double digits, and injuries are much higher than that. So just want to take a moment of pause here to, one, appreciate and remember those that were killed and injured in this horrific attack, but also to give some thanks to the first responders that were on site and were able to subdue and ultimately kill the asshole responsible for this just heartless and meaningless attack. So just a moment of pause for them. All right. Now shifting gears to the football game that was postponed. Rightfully, you don't take chances with anything like that, and of course they're still investigating everything going on. But they reswept and made sure security was still good at the Superdome. And the Sugar Bowl went on a day later, so we get the Sugar Bowl yesterday, midday, mid-evening, mid-afternoon, 4:00 kickoff. Was supposed to be a nice night game atmosphere the night before, but we get a little earlier start. One, we already had a bowl game in the late slot, but just making everything work with the schedule of the city. But we got Notre Dame versus Georgia in the 4:00 slot, and Notre Dame really asserted themselves in the first half. And I know everybody thought back probably at halftime, because the TV crew also brought it up, thought back to the whole Georgia-Alabama game where Georgia was down by a ton and made a comeback. And there were a couple of moments in the second half that you thought, the momentum might swing here. But credit to Notre Dame, as you said with Ohio State, every time Georgia seemed to kind of get something rolling, Notre Dame had an answer of sorts. And I want to give Marcus Freeman some credit here, give him his flowers for that 4th and 1 decision. To not only, like, you're in a spot, right? That's a spot where you're sort of deep in your own range. If you don't get that, you could be in a real pickle defensively in a game where the momentum could completely swing. And they go get it. Now, I do want to mention 2 things. What's that? Yeah, I do want to mention 2 things. So, one, Kirby Smart brings up the fact that the SEC officiating crew apparently has told him that you can't bring on 11, then run them off and bring on a fresh 11. I don't know the rule. I'm going to be honest, and I haven't looked it up yet. I just heard him maybe a couple of hours ago. I heard his soundbite on it. So I am going to do my diligence and look it up and try to find out. If that's true, if that's the rule, we really screwed up, right? We can't screw that up in the Sugar Bowl. We can't screw it up in the national quarterfinals. If it's not the rule, and the SEC crews have been telling people that, we're screwing that up on a weekly basis, it feels like, in the SEC. So one of those 2 things is a problem. However, I want to bring something to your attention that I don't know if anybody's actually talking about. Notre Dame committed a false start on that play. So you noticed it too? Number 24 there.
Fucking wide receiver on the bottom of the formation.
The DB
very clearly.
The DB pointed at him too.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not alone in this, because I have not heard anybody on TV or any of the talking heads talking about it.
Nope.
It's not induced. It's not induced by the defensive lineman, for one, because they're defensive linemen and he's on the edge they can't say that, and he's off the line of scrimmage. 2, they should have blown it dead then. If the false start, right? They shouldn't have been allowed to throw the pass. They didn't complete it, but they shouldn't have been allowed to throw the pass. But he committed a fucking false start. What are we doing? How are we fucking this up in the national quarterfinals? How are we screwing this up? And Notre Dame punts on 4th and 6. They don't even think about going on 4th and 6. And Georgia gets the ball, and this could completely swing the momentum of the game. Now, mind you, I don't think Gunnar Stockton and that offensive line were going to be able to make the comeback, but I hate when these things happen and we can point to something that's not a judgment call.
No.
That's black and white. He moved. He jumped. As soon as Riley Leonard claps, he jumps. That's a false start.
Yep.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that noticed it, because I wrote it in another group chat as well, and I wanted to kind of bring it up in this show off the cuff. I don't know how we missed that. I just don't know how we miss stuff like that. It is so frustrating.
Well, that wasn't the only penalty that was mistaken on a 4th and short. If you remember, I think it was prior. It was either prior or after. I don't remember which one exactly, but they flagged Notre Dame on a 4th and short for an illegal formation or an illegal shift, excuse me, because they said,
that was incorrect as well.
Exactly. Yep. They said that the tight end and the tight end wasn't set and the receiver removed, so they called it an illegal shift, which was not the case at all.
Nope.
And so they backed up Notre Dame. So it's like, in the grand scheme, they're offsetting 5-yard penalties, but
that's fair.
But that one specific, because the illegal shift was about midfield, they're kind of in no man's land. This one, they're inside their own 20.
Right.
If you don't get that, like
you're living dangerously.
Yeah, you're flipping the field. You're giving Georgia the ball at their own 45, and then I don't think Georgia goes down and scores, but like it's possible. We saw Gunnar Stockton. We saw him hit a big play down the right sideline. We saw him have a wide open receiver down the left who dropped the ball, which was, God, that was bad. He hit him right in the hands and he just dropped it. Mm-hmm. Apparently, I'm not sure where else you're supposed to hit him, but the hands was not the place. I did not think that Gunnar Stockton was the problem in this game, truthfully. I think the offensive line, and I said this to you during the game, that offensive line looked so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, their left tackle was getting beat left and right. Like,
he was a swinging door.
Yeah. Oh, it was abysmal. And that was without the All-American pass rusher, defensive end captain for Notre Dame.
Yep.
Like, if you're getting beat that bad, imagine if that guy's playing, like, you're just getting dominated, which is why
I might not survive this game.
Yeah, right. Which like was the reason I picked Notre Dame in this game, because I thought their defense was going to be good enough to shut down this Georgia offense, which it basically was, right?
Yep.
It got to a point in the second half where Georgia was they're running like jet motions just to try to get anything working. I mean, I think Gunnar Stockton is going to be a fine college quarterback. Like, he obviously has the wheels, he's got the arm. It's going to be play recognition and throwing with anticipation and stuff like that he's going to have to figure out going forward. But like in this game, they didn't have the horses to run a real offense. And it comes down to that offensive line, which is huge and physical, but like they couldn't even get a run game going, which I thought was crazy, because like that's what they've really been hanging their hat on all year long, was just making it work in the run game with Etienne and Frazier. And they weren't able to get that working whatsoever. Notre Dame just came out and stifled them at every turn, despite going into halftime having just a huge lead in terms of time of possession and plays run. But Notre Dame, bend don't break, man. They had that fumble. They forced a fumble in the red zone off of Etienne, who first career fumble for him.
Yeah.
Or first in like
for that.
Yeah, right. First in like 300 carries, something. It had been forever, basically, since he fumbled. And then they just didn't give up touchdowns when they were deep in the red zone. And then pair that with they scored, they kicked the field goal, and then they got the offensive red zone turnover. So they get the ball right at the beginning or at the end of half, score again, and then they return the opening kickoff in the second half. They scored 17 points in 25 seconds. And it's
that triple dip was devastating.
Tough, man.
Devastating.
Real tough.
Triple dip.
It's just, the game did not look like an ass whooping, but if you look at the scoreboard, it's like, oh my God, they crushed Georgia, right? 13 points. I thought it was a little more closely contested with the Notre Dame defense having a bend don't break mentality, having an answer every time Georgia got across the 50-yard line. Basically, it became such a game of field position. It was almost like an old school type of football field where we're used to offenses going up and down the field, knockdown, drag out, shootout type deal. And that just wasn't the case. This was a knockdown, drag out, field position game. And Notre Dame's defense was just better than Georgia's offense today. Like, that's just what it came down to, in my opinion. And
yeah, that Notre Dame defense felt like some of those old Belichick defenses for the Patriots, where you can do whatever you want between the 20s. You're not getting in the end zone.
Nope. And they were up for the challenge, man. They really shut down that Georgia offense. I don't know that game is any different if Carson Beck plays. I'll be honest with you.
I don't think so either. Honestly, you and I talked about it. I don't think Gunnar Stockton was the problem. You were first to say that, but I agree with you. I don't think Gunnar Stockton was really the problem in this game. It was that Georgia offensive line and turnovers. Turnovers were just such a big difference. Notre Dame capitalized on the turnovers they got too. Yep. And they got contributions from all three phases. Coaches say that, right? All three phases. That kickoff return touchdown to start the second half was just such a backbreaker for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to talk first about these semifinal matchups, and then we've got a nice off the board game tonight. We've got our big matchup between North Texas and Texas State. Lines up to 65. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But our national semifinals. Oh, yeah. Cool man agrees. Beck wouldn't have mattered. I agree. I don't think that quarterback was the problem. I just think that Notre Dame really just kind of played bully ball and played a lot of bend but don't break defense. But they also, that offensive line, Riley Leonard hit every alternate line you could have bet in terms of rushing yards. So he had a big day running behind that offensive line. I think the only time I thought the offensive line didn't execute was that 4th and 1 where they went and Riley Leonard got stuffed. They just had a breakdown up the middle. Other than that, I thought Notre Dame's offensive line was great and Georgia's offensive line was fucking terrible.
Yep.
And Georgia, we talked about this. Georgia's not as explosive as they've been in past years either. They can't just make up for the running game isn't going, so we're just going to throw it up to a bunch of great wide receivers and tight ends on the outside.
I saw a clip of that 4 wide receiver commits that are going to Georgia next year, in the tunnel, and they were on the sideline and I was like, man, can they go in the game now? Can we get these guys on the field now?
Can we get them on the field now? Yeah. They're hurting. They're hurting on the outside, and it shows because the guys that have been on Georgia last year, like Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers especially, set some records this year for rookies in the NFL. So you're losing a lot of production there. Not to mention a handful of Pickens and some of the other guys that are in the NFL now.
Yeah, Cass Jones is cool, but he was a walk-on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the one sack.
Yeah, yep, for sure. Robert, what's up, bud? Thanks for tuning in.
Line from Notre Dame, arrow up.
Arrow up, for sure. Offensive line for Notre Dame. All right, so let's talk about these national semifinal matchups. So on one side of the board, we go to Dallas for Ohio State against Texas. I want to preview this. We'll make our official picks next week. So the games are actually going to be played after we record the show next week. We're going to get back on our regular schedule. We appreciate people being flexible with us around the holidays. Appreciate y'all tuning in kind of midday the last couple of weeks. But now that the holidays are done, we're going to get back to Wednesday nights. So anybody new, cool, man, appreciate you. New viewer here. We'll be Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. on the East Coast going forward. So we will give our official picks for the national semifinals next week, but I want to do a little bit of a preview here. Talk to me a little bit about Ohio State, Texas. What do you think is going to be the biggest factor in this game? And what does each team have to do to be able to win this game?
So I would say that the biggest, if I in my head game script, if Texas wins this game, is that they get the run game going. They're going to have to do that because I'm not sure that Quinn Ewers is going to be able to just drop back and pass the ball against this defense.
Yeah.
If you tell me it's Quinn Ewers versus Caleb Downs, I'm going to take Caleb Downs every single time in that matchup. Caleb Downs has already played against Quinn Ewers. He played against him last year when Texas went to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. Yep. So Caleb Downs knows what he's getting. And I keep talking about him because he's the quarterback of that defense. He runs everything from that free safety position, kind of center fielder. Everything on that defense keys off of what Caleb Downs sees and the calls he makes on that back end. And they just kind of turn the boys up front loose. That's what scares me about this, right? I understand that the Texas offensive line is pretty good. I don't know if they're going to be able to get the run game going, which is then going to force them to rely on Quinn Ewers being elite in the passing game, which is something that we have not seen him do since probably the Michigan game. And then he got hurt right after that, and the pec and the ribs thing, and it was kind of a mess down the stretch with him, right? So I really think the key is going to be getting that offensive line going, or that running game going with Wisner and Blue. I don't think that's going to be possible for them, though. So I guess my real answer of what I think Texas is going to have to do to win this game is Quinn Ewers is just going to have to be electric. Like, that's just all there is to it. He's going to have to play the best game of his career, better than when they went into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama last season. He's going to have to be awesome, and he's going to have to carry him to this victory. In my opinion, that's what's going to have to happen for this Texas team. On the other side, Ohio State just has to keep doing what they've been doing. They're going to have to throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith, and they're going to have to let everybody else work off of that, right? That is the thing that makes this offense work, is you throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith, and then you let your two-headed monster at running back do their thing, and the other receivers, NFL receiver Cardell Tate, NFL receiver Emeka Ibuka, work off of Jeremiah Smith, because there will be openings for them, and then you just trust your trigger man and Will Howard to get them the ball in the correct positions.
Yeah, I agree. I think less so than probably our other matchup that we're going to talk about. This game is going to be less so one in the trenches. I think both teams have very good offense and defensive lines. I think Ohio State's offensive line has been playing better in the playoff than we expected them to, and I think that's going to continue going forward. I don't think Ohio State's going to really be able to lean on the run, so I think they're going to have to continue what you described as passing to set up the run. And it's going to be interesting to see how that Ohio State front holds up against a very strong Texas team that lost a couple guys in the NFL and just reloaded, especially in the interior. Both teams are strong on the back end too, right? Both secondaries are very good. But I think you mentioned the name that is like the ultimate X factor in Jeremiah Smith. The guy's he's not from this fucking planet, might not be from this galaxy. He's just so good. He's hard to cover. If they try to go man defense, which is kind of what Texas's bread and butter is, we saw what happened against Oregon. Oregon was just getting beat bad in man coverage. And they even had safeties shading to that side, and Will Howard was able to find J.J. Smith in some of those holes. I think that's where it's going to be won. I think one of these two quarterbacks is going to be the difference in this game, and it's going to take a very good effort from both of them. I think I lean Will Howard with the advantage just because of the number of playmakers at Ohio State. You mentioned the 3 NFL wide receivers. I'll mention they've got 2 tight ends that are capable of catching the ball. And Judkins and Henderson can both catch the ball out of the backfield and take the thing the distance. If Texas can get a little more contribution, especially from Jaden Blue in the passing game, if they can get him the ball on the edge and he can make some plays, because I think he's probably their better playmaker in space at the running back position. I think Wisner's a little more downhill guy. If they can get some contributions from him, it could loosen up that back end a little bit, and you could start to see some of those wide receivers from Texas get loose, Molden and Bond and et cetera. But I'm with you. I think that's where the game is going to get won. Quinn Ewers is going to have one of his – he's going to have a signature game for Texas to win this game. But I also think on the other side, Will Howard's going to have to play well. But I ask less of him just because of what he's working with on that side. I'll take those playmakers over Texas playmakers every day of the week. They're just so fucking talented, and that's not a knock on Texas. Like, they've got some good playmakers themselves. Ohio State's just loaded. 3 NFL wide receivers that are on the field at any given time. They run that 11 package so much, and it's hard to match up with that much talent. But I do agree. I think quarterbacks. I think the running games are going to probably be fairly even. I don't expect a lot of explosiveness out of the running game from either side. I think the quarterbacks are going to have to win it. If Texas can get the running game going, though, I do agree with you. If Texas can get the running game going, they can take some of the air out of the football against this Ohio State offense that is very explosive. So we'll see. I think it comes down to quarterback play, though, for sure.
There is a chance in this game that I've said it all year long. Whenever Texas plays games, the best unit on the field in whatever game they're playing is the Texas defense, right? So there's an opportunity for that Texas defense, especially their pass rush, to kind of collapse the offensive line that has been elevated to such high highs there with Ohio State, right? We talked about it, especially that Ohio State game. a little bit with the Indiana game. The offensive line for Ohio State has kind of been patchwork at this point, and they're playing super, super well. They're playing incredibly well. But like in the back of my mind, there's always that aspect of we know that it's patchwork at this point, and this Texas
will the levee break?
Exactly, this Texas pass rush, they can get after the quarterback for sure. So like there is an opportunity there for that Texas defense to kind of, like you said, break the dam and collapse this offensive line that has been so incredible for Ohio State here recently. Also, one more thing for Texas.
Yep.
Let's go back to last year, final game of the regular season. And I'm going to go to the Iron Bowl game. And if you remember, there was a 4th and goal from the 31 play that Alabama completed a pass to win that game and make the playoff.
Unbelievable.
Do you remember who caught that ball in the back of the end zone?
The guy who plays for Texas now.
The guy who plays for Texas who had 1 catch for 22 yards in Isaiah Bond.
Yeah.
Where are you at, buddy?
Yeah.
Because I would argue that Quinn Ewers is a better thrower of the ball than is Jalen Milroe.
I legitimately thought Bond was going to be their number 1 this year.
Same.
He fucking has not.
They needed a fourth down play in overtime, and they went to Golden. Like, I don't know what Isaiah Bond is doing, but it's not
playing.
It's not doing a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Maybe this is the game he has a little bit of a breakout, but it's not been great. That's for sure. All right, on the other side of the bracket, we've got Notre Dame against a Penn State team. This is a legitimate top 10 matchup for James Franklin. Notre Dame coming off a very good win against Georgia, we just talked about, but Penn State, have they necessarily been tested right in the eyes of what we would call a typical test? You play SMU, you play a Boise State team from the Mountain West. However you feel about Boise State, Penn State's they've got a better roster, right? They're a Big Ten school and all that, national powerhouse, if you want to talk about the recruiting trail. Talk to me about same thing here, man. What's each team got to do to win this game, and what's going to be the biggest factor?
Oh man, I feel less confident about this game than I do about the Ohio State game.
The line reflects it too. Early line is 1.5 Notre Dame. That's basically a pick 'em.
Yeah,
especially on a neutral site.
Man, you're telling me that in the highest leverage game of the season, I either have to pick Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame or James Franklin and Penn State. And I have to pick one of these teams to. Could they tie? Is that a thing?
It's a cruel circumstance, ain't
it? Okay, so what each team needs to do to win the game. Andy Kotelnicki, if your running game is working against Notre Dame, do not try to throw the ball because that secondary in Notre Dame is incredible. They are far better than the secondary that plays in Boise, and you will regret it. I promise. Yeah. They're not going to give up a 64-yard post route like Boise State did. I just don't. I don't foresee that being a thing that happens. So if you're averaging 7.5 yards a carry, continue to run the ball.
Stick with that.
Please, if you want to win the game. On the other side of this game, you have to run the ball. You have to establish the run if you're going to be successful with Notre Dame, right? Their offensive line has to play exactly how they did against Georgia. They got to lean on the defensive line. I don't know if Abdul Carter is going to play. My assumption would be that he is going to play. If he does not, error up Notre Dame. So if you're Notre Dame, you have to establish the ground game. You have to open up passing lanes, like quick slants, screen plays, whatever for Riley Leonard. Because if Riley Leonard gets into a drop back, like have to pass the ball situation, I just don't have the confidence in him. If that becomes the way this game is forced to play out, then I would go with I'd go with Penn State. I guess I trust Drew Aller more. He's played really well recently. This is just like these are two teams that want to line up and smash the ball into the other team over and over again.
3 yards and a cloud of dust.
Yeah, but then you get the Kotelnicki side of it where he's like, oh, well, we're gonna throw the ball. I'm like, Jalen Daniels does not play for you anymore, bud. You have Drew Aller. Like, I don't know. I'm gonna need time to think about this one. Like, I know I've had a couple days, but like I need more time to figure out which way I want to lean. My ticket for Notre Dame to win the title says I'm gonna pick Notre Dame. But
by the way, how's that looking in terms of your cash out option?
Oh, we're up, buddy. We're up.
Arrow
we're
up. Bud. Arrow up.
Yeah, we're up. We've been very successful.
Sitting on some profit. Scrooge
very
McDuck
successful. Yes, very successful this postseason in college football.
Love it. So Abdul Carter posted a cryptic, I guess is the way they wanted to describe it.
One
Darth Vader post where Darth Vader's in the tank and healing and treating injuries. So I guess that means he's gonna at least expects to play. Maybe. I would. Where Darth makes his break out of that tank and becomes a bad guy, but
sure. I would like to ask Abdul Carter if he has ever seen the Star Wars movies.
It doesn't end well for Darth.
It does not end well for Darth Vader in that scenario. I don't.
Yeah.
Seems like you could have gone a different direction.
Yeah.
I don't like maybe Batman. When he's
climbs out of the hole.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, when he's at Ra's al Ghul's like monastery. There's just
better options.
Yeah. Darth Vader loses.
Yeah.
Badly.
Yeah. Twice, really.
Yeah, but what do I know? What do I know?
Yeah. But I agree with you almost entirely on everything you said about this game in terms of the preview. Yeah, Deadpool, never die, buddy, never die. I agree with you though. Your take on this game in terms of like what's going to happen. I think we're going to see. So I looked at the over/under line on this. I think I'm going to put an early ticket in on the under because I think this is going to close much lower. Right now it sits at 46.5, at least according to ESPN. I haven't looked at an actual sports book on that line yet. But if I can open up my DraftKings app after the show here and see it at 46.5, I'm taking the under. I think this is going to be a game where, as you put it perfectly, they're going to line up across from each other and just smash into each other all game. This is going to be 3 yards, cloud of dust. Maybe a team can break through and hit maybe one explosive play, and that could be the difference in the game. I fully expect we're going to see some real old school. James Franklin is probably going to be in Andy's ear, basically saying like, we're not taking chances against that secondary because that's a real secondary up there in South Bend. I could see 45 runs and maybe 18 passes in this game for even both offenses, honestly, because we know that Notre Dame and Riley Leonard, the passing game is fairly limited. Riley Leonard is fairly limited in the passing game. And I just think that Penn State's going to play this very cautious and close to the vest. And I think that's probably their best chance of winning, honestly, is that this thing comes down to one of the two kickers having their foot on the ball to end this. And Penn State wins like a 16-13 type game. I think that's the optimal scenario for Penn State to win this game. And I also think it's kind of the optimal scenario for Notre Dame to win this game because I don't think they can get into any sort of shootout and actually expect to win a game. They've got a very good kicker as well. I'll leave it to you to let us know where he learned all that kicking from.
Oh, you talking about Mitch Jeter?
Yeah.
The guy who's the most accurate kicker in college football for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah. Where did he play?
That's where he. Oh, he was a Gamecock. He kicked for the University of South Carolina. That's right. That's right. When we scored 6 touchdowns against Tennessee and ran out of fireworks because we scored too much. Yeah, he made all of those extra points. Oh, yeah. Mitch Jeter. Yeah, that if he had not transferred out from University of South Carolina, we probably would have been 11-1 and in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Weird. That guy.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
But I think the game script for both of these teams is very, very similar. Run the ball, play good defense, and we'll see how this breaks out with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I think it's the proper game script. I don't think I want either of these quarterbacks to be trusted with the ball. if I'm either head coach, because I think both defenses are very, very talented, for one. And two, neither team really has a guy on the outside that you can say, like, that's the guy that I know is going to be able to win on a route, get open, and go get me a big play. I do think Mr. Warren could be a little bit of a factor in this in terms of using him in a number of different ways, but he's not that explosive guy. He's more of an H-back, Chris Cooley style of guy who's you can use him a lot of ways. He's gonna be very reliable, but he did not, or he does not stretch a defense the way that, if you're going to lean on somebody in the pass game, you need someone who's going to be able to stretch the defense. So I think both of these teams, the game script is fairly similar, and it's going to be a matter of just which offensive line is going to be able to establish the line of scrimmage better than the other offensive line in terms of taking on each of these two very talented defense. Both strong up front, both very strong on the back end. So I think it's going to come down to which offensive line has a better game in this one. And learned from his dad, the chiropractor.
Well, his dad wouldn't have had to take a flight to go help him heal up if he had stayed at South Carolina. He could have just driven down there.
Right. Exactly.
I'm not sad about him transferring at all. It didn't hurt my feelings one bit. I'm super happy for him to be playing in the semifinal game instead of kicking for the University of South Carolina. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to have a new kicker next year. Oh my God.
Yeah. You guys struggled this year. Yeah, I think I agree, Robert. I think the team who has the ball last with an opportunity to get into field goal range could come down to that, and whether or not that kicker makes said kick. I think it easily could come down to that. All right. Anything we didn't cover necessarily from the semifinals that you wanted to touch base? Or even the quarterfinal, if you want to circle back.
I think we pretty much hit it all.
All right. I just wanted to cover that because we got some fun on the docket tonight.
Yeah, yes we do. we had one-sided fun on the docket last night.
Oh yeah, we did.
Ole Miss poured it on.
Yeah. Jackson Dart looked fucking phenomenal last night. Yep. We talked about it, right? Ole Miss they were playing guys, and not many people run a score up like Lane Kiffin does.
To that note, when the bracket first came out, there were kind of three teams that were saying they deserve to be the 12th seed. You had Alabama, obviously, you had Ole Miss, and you had South Carolina. And everybody was kind of standing on the table for Alabama. Mm-hmm. And then they went out and laid an egg against Michigan. Just another bad game from Jalen Milroe. Yeah. South Carolina went out and laid an egg against Illinois, which I don't know how much you want to talk about the fucking Bush League shit that Brett Bielema was doing, where if South Carolina went slow, he substituted his entire defense and ran us up against the play clock. And then if South Carolina went fast, they faked an injury.
Laid guys down.
And then he tried to fight Shane Beamer tried to fight him, but
he said some shit about the trick play on the kickoff return.
Yeah, which Shane Beamer cleared with the referees before the game started. You can throw the ball back.
Grow up, Brett.
Yeah. Like, Brett, you are fucking winded from walking from your sideline to where your player is down. You think you're going to fight my coach and be okay? Yeah. I don't. Put your fucking arms down, you goddamn substitution merchant, and play a real football game. Although I will say I felt vindicated in all of my analysis of Illinois for the entire season because they did exactly what I said they were going to do all year long.
They like to do.
They drag you into the mud, and then they ask Luke Altmaier to make one or two plays, and he does, and then they win the game. And that's exactly what they did against South Carolina. Also, Lenore Sellers ran for 160 yards against Clemson. He carried the ball like 5 times this game. I'm not sure what Mike Shula was doing, but it seems like maybe we should go back to what Lenore Sellers does best.
Yeah.
Also, I have officially decided. I asked you the question, which SEC quarterback you want going into the season next year. My answer is officially DJ Lagway. Yeah. I know that Sellers is like my guy, and I appreciate the shit out of him, and I love that kid. Struggles to throw the ball. Yeah. Struggles to throw the ball in like medium range.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about it. I told you he needs to put about 10,000 reps in this offseason. Just throwing intermediate throws. I was watching on the radio, so you saw it firsthand, but I was watching on the radio, and the South Carolina radio crew on SEC radio described it in very, very dire terms in terms of the one where he threw it and missed the guy in the end zone. The ball flew maybe 13 yards and it needed to fly 15 yards, and he missed him like just that bad. On a they called it a very easy throw. Yeah. And it seems like you were describing it the same way because I was listening on the radio and you were watching it. But
yeah, the guys on the TV call were like, "Oh, the pressure affected the throw, and he threw it kind of behind his." No, he just missed it. He needed to put the ball in front of Josh Simon, and he put the ball on Josh Simon's trail foot.
Yeah,
but yeah, what are we doing? That makes no sense to me. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Lenore Sellers and Nick Harbor should have to be tied together with a rope for the offseason. Yeah. Like, just, you need to throw him the ball 40,000 times between now and next Labor Day and be the most dynamic quarterback receiver combo going into the season next year.
There's absolutely zero reason Nick Harbor shouldn't be a phenomenal receiver next year, a real threat in college football next year. He's 6'4", I believe, 215-ish, 220, but he's just a lightning bolt. Also, like the dude is Randy Moss. Like, he's big and fast, combination like that. I'm not saying he's Randy Moss, but he's like that combination of size and speed. Yeah, and he's almost like stockier than Randy, kind of like a TO even. There's no reason that they shouldn't be throwing just every ball that they can throw this offseason. They should be exhausting the Dick's Sporting Goods inventory going through footballs this offseason.
Yeah. I get that it's blasphemy to compare anybody to Jeremiah Smith right now. And I'm not saying that Nick Harbor is Jeremiah Smith. I'm saying the game plan that they run with Jeremiah Smith should be the game plan they run with Nick Harbor, where every time you reset the chains, the ball goes his direction at least once.
Yeah.
Because he's taller than everybody in the field, and he's faster than everybody on the field. And if you are not taking advantage of that, if you're throwing twice to your tight end and running the ball once, like, you're doing yourself a disservice on the offensive game plan by not getting him involved more than he already is.
Yeah.
But that's a discussion for next season, Gary.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's talk about tonight's fun. Minnesota versus – I'm just kidding. That is not going to be fun yet. Over-under on that's 42.5, and Minnesota's a 10-point favorite. Vatek has a lot of transfer portal activity right now.
Yeah.
North Texas, Texas State, though. This is a big spread, Texas State minus 14. However, the fun part is that the over-under is 65.5 on ESPN right now. I'm not sure what the live line is, but 65.5 as it sits on ESPN's website. And we have a rule. If it's in the 60s, we're playing it, and we're betting the over, and we're going to have a lot of fun watching this game. Yep. Two very high-powered offenses. North Texas has almost no defense. So Texas State could be in the 40s easily in this game, and North Texas could be in the 20s or 30s easily in this game. I'll be locked in. I know you'll be locked in. We're going to have some fun with a lot of points on the board between North Texas and Texas State this evening. The Mean Green and the Bobcats.
Yep. McLeod, JMU kid, transfer.
Yeah.
And then about had a month to game plan for this.
Yep.
Expect to see some trick plays probably worked in there.
Oh yeah.
A lot of exciting things going to happen tonight in that bowl game.
Yeah, for sure. All right, bud. Well, hey, I appreciate your flexibility with schedule, but I also appreciate the viewers out there with their flexibility of schedule. Happy holidays. Any closing thoughts from you?
My buddy texted me. He said Illini over Gamecocks after South Carolina lost. And I just sent a screenshot of Duke beating Virginia Tech in college basketball as my response. So college basketball is in full effect, baby. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Cooper Flagg, he's doing amazing things. Isaiah Evans, averaging 14 points a game in 17 minutes a game. Casual, just something to keep an eye out for the fans of college basketball out there. I'm just saying, just something to keep an eye on. That's all.
Oh yeah. We are only 2 months away from the madness too.
Yes, we are.
But yeah, college basketball. See, I'm glad the season finally started a couple of weeks ago.
It was nice.
I didn't think we were going to get there, but it finally started. But yeah, we are only a couple months from the madness. We are in full swing of conference play has started, and we've got some really good matchups. The SEC is exciting this year. A lot of teams at the top. A lot of ranked teams at the top. They've got 1 and 2 right now, not to mention the rest of them that are in the top 25. But yeah, college basketball in full swing. We're here for it. But for Bentley and everybody else at Backyard Sports, this has been another episode of Tailgate Trash Talk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are